So there's one thing that you have to understand. There's a huge difference between multi-ethnic and multicultural, and we need to get this right because one actually leads to making America great again, and the other one makes America nothing at all. And so here's how to understand the difference. If you haven't really done a little bit of homework on this, this is really important to frame out. So we're going to walk through it. So multi-ethnic is what most people actually think of when they hear the word multicultural, and they're not the same thing. So multi-ethnic is the core philosophy is the demographic diversity unified by a single civic identity. That's what allows you to be multi-ethnic, is that there is still a single civic entity. It's not just a legal definition. So the goal is e pluribus unum. Out of many, one people come together. And it's not just a unification of a legality that you just have a stamp of a piece of paper. Okay? The difference between multicultural ideology is a rejection of a primary host culture. All cultures exist in parallel. So they assume that your primary host culture is nothing. It doesn't exist. It's whatever, however many different groups of people come to that land, and that's what makes up your culture. And this is fundamentally a paradigm of the left. That's where this comes from. That is not the direction or the origin of America, and it is not the framework to understand how we're going to make things better. So the societal goal of multiculturalism is not e pluribus unum, it's e pluribus pluribus, which is out of many, many. They're not enculturating. They're not coming together. They're not assimilating. They are literally encouraged to remain separate groups. And they are encouraged to, actually lead their own kinds of ghettoization, of creating their own little enclaves and not ever kind of breaking out of them or having, and that's what makes them really dangerous to the American system. Need I say more of mentioning what's going on in Michigan? There are real situations of communities that have been overrun, and this is because of multicultural ideology, which is not the same as multi-ethnic. And so the ultimate outcome of multi-ethnic societies is a cohesive, high-trust society drawing on a specific tenet, some sort of ultimate value that you all believe in, versus the ultimate outcome of of multiculturalism is fundamentally competing tribes. It's just the way it will intrinsically be. It will be fragmented, and it's going to have identities that are separate from their host culture, meaning they are not going to actually be the very thing that they claim to be, which is like what makes an American American? Well, it's not remaining all your own independent entities, speaking your own languages and doing your own thing. Multi-ethnic society is a demographic reality that can thrive in a republic. Multiculturalism is an ideology of divisiveness and disparity. That is its intrinsic quality. And so we must carry forward the difference. It's really this simple. You come to America to be one unified entity. You can be more how God made you, but those fundamental tenets have to start shifting to become like the culture and the society and the value systems and the ethics of the root nation. If you come and you try to do your own thing, or you try to continue the way in which you have grown up and not enculturated, not broken from your ancient roots of the different ancestral grounds and culture and values and ethics, you're going to create 5 separate groups that fractionate. And that's not possible. You cannot have a nation where you have a division. You have to have a unification around core values. And that's why this whole thing of the left, of the DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, are not American. They are communist, they are cultural Marxist, and the point of cultural Marxism is to destroy unity. It is to destroy the actual bonds that make up a true union, that make up a true nation, that make up true hierarchy. That's the design of them. And so the people who are pushing multiculturalism, number one, they could be just people kind of deceived, like many people are, or they could be people who actually believe in the false ideology and want to collapse America. So we have to know the difference. There are three misconceptions of culture. The myth is that culture equals race. A lot of people get this confused. No. Ethnicity is the inherited and immutable characteristics. Culture is cultivated. It's learned. It demands change. Confusing the two perverts the ability of your cultures to be able to grow. It prevents individuals from being able to grow. Because if you marry culture with your race, that means the way you are is the way you are fundamentally are. You can't learn to grow, to better yourself, to adopt new ways. That's the difference in multiculturalism. Multiculturalism forces coherence to a set root ideology and marries it to their biology. Of course, then they also say, unless you're a biologist, you can't even know what the difference is. So then you have the myth that culture equals just food. Why are we rejecting cultures? We have lots of good food. Don't you like Mexican food? Don't you like Italian food? Don't you like... No. Emblems like cuisines and festivals are merely the surface. Culture is the outward manifestation of what the people worship or value. That is what culture is. And culture is not the food. Culture is it is the way the food is prepared and what it means and the table settings and the ethics and the cult communion around it and how the communion works is a manifestation of the background beliefs of the people who lived it. That's what makes it unique. But the food itself is fine. It's the root culture that's the problem. And the root culture is what we need to address. So then there's the myth that culture is morally neutral, that it's just the way people are. No, that's like the opposite of what it is. Culture is the result of obeying or disobeying fundamental moral laws. Not all cultures are equal. Some faithfully reflect truth and human flourishing, while others are not. They produce misery. And so we have to understand, we must break these misconceptions. Culture is not race. Culture is not food. Culture is not morally neutral. And so we have to understand that there are superficial differences like our cuisine or fashion or festivals. Now our art gets questionable, but there are fundamental axioms that are undergirding the frameworks that we enjoy. And those undergirding frameworks have to be reset towards the framework that makes America great. That's the framework that needs to be exchanged. These top things, they can continue, but the fundamental axioms and the substructures, like language is the fundamental communication method that allows a people to be unified. This is why after Babel, the people who spoke different languages grouped into fundamentally different cultures and nations eventually. And eventually a whole different ethnic groups, because that is ultimately over time, their groups became so isolated and reinforced into where they were. And so literally the intermarrying and the various selection pressures that occur in their environment and the food and things like that create different cultures, different ethnicities. So this is why it's very important to begin to frame these correctly so that we can deal with the realities of today. There is a difference between kin-based tribalism and reciprocal altruism, or the Western innovation of common law frameworks. So the common law allows us to operate within shared values and not have to be relying upon the tribal kinships that we were ancestrally came from. So that is what fundamentally the West is about, but it requires a adoption of the fundamental substructure, these fundamental axioms, before we can actually have an ordered society. And those are the fundamental axioms that are missing. These things are missing from our cultural zeitgeist in American, and even in our political systems. And this political election in Kenosha gave us a very good taste of where conservatives were at, not understanding the fundamental differences. So that's why we're talking about this. And so there are economics of morality, like the milk run metaphor. So there's a really good analogy that is discussed by people from, this is one man I want to share with you eventually some of more of his work that talks about, he came from a different culture in Africa and then came to settle in Idaho, and he recognized there is a totally different set of societal ethics or societal ethical operating system that's running in the background in Idaho that is not running in Africa. He could arrive at the farm, he can open an unlocked fridge, he could leave cash in an open jar, and he could go home, and the customer only pays for the milk. Versus in a low trust society, you have navigate barbed wires and walls. A clerk has to unlock a second room. You have to pass a security guard. Clerk unlocks a fridge. And then you finally have to pay or bribe, usually, to even get what you want. There is a fundamentally different substructure of ethics, based on the cultural values that create the societal requirements. And so we have to, when they come to America, they have to learn the system that operates similar to what you're seeing here in Idaho. That ethical system requires a change of their fundamental state of who they are as a person. That fundamental state is whether or not you know the God who made you. And one of the great opportunities of America is to help people from other countries come to know the God who made them, because America was built on the foundation of biblical order and recognizes that it is in God who we trust, Yahweh, Jesus, who we trust. And so if you've not learned that the founding fathers actually tried to, and our early founding directly calls us a Christian nation, and that the whole purpose of why we're here is to establish a covenant, a citizen covenant for a civil order based on biblical Protestant principles for the purpose of sharing the gospel and creating the kingdom of God. That is the purpose of America. It's right in our documents, in our first early charters of our colonies. And most people have not heard of it because the society doesn't want you to know that. But stay tuned to my channels and you're going to know. There is a difference between the civic duties of responsibility. And so when we don't actually understand the proper understanding of what is our obligations, things fall apart. So the consequence, when inconsistent rights clash, when everybody has their own groups of value systems and they consider them universal, they consider them the way they should run things. For instance, Sharia law versus biblical law or American order, you're going to get a clash. It results in not in compromise, but in infinite grievance, HR litigation, and societal anarchy, and a proliferation of unbound rights. So if you don't understand that rights are limited to how God explains what you are allowed to do and therefore encouraged to do as an image bearer of Him, whose job it is to bring order for the flourishment of the world, right order through the gospel, and through rightly ordering ourselves according to God's word. It is being transformed by Jesus and then living in light of eternity to look like Jesus until we are taken home. And so everything that we're doing as a society is to be oriented to that. It is the right order of society, and those Judeo-Christian obligations and duties that our American society is built on cannot be the undergirding substructure by a continued fragmentation of the culture. And that's the fundamental difference. The people around us have to be enculturating. And the core part of enculturation that occurs in America is actually not just the oath of office or the citizen's oath. It's not even participation in the political process, voting. The fundamental change is the culture, which is the center of the culture, is the cultus, the worship. Worship of what? Where are we getting these transcendent truths that we're ordering everything by? Or we should be, as we did. We are getting them from the Bible. All of our legal systems used to swear on the Bible for a reason. It wasn't just a happy symbol just because we happen to be Christian. No, the Bible is a fundamentally different document. It is not just a document of Christianity. It is literally the expression in human writing, the mind of God. It is intrinsic. It is of a different substance than merely, it's not a book. It literally communicates the mind of God, Logos, the Logos made flesh. And it is the understanding of God's word that gives us literally the building codes for how we are built society. And when we don't have those, society collapses. And that's what happened in 2020. We finally got to see the full collapse systematically of every core system that America had and the West had underbuilt because we have lost our foundations. And so, why is our society continuing to fragment? Well, it's partly due to the evolution of leftist fragmentation. The left is continually pulling the Overton window all the way back to the left, to this horrible, horrible place. Well, what is that exactly? Well, Marxist universalism, the concept of Marx explained, is that the proletariat, you can understand how Marxism works, big words here, but the proletariat is the engine Marx envisioned for a universal class, unified by a shared economic reality, moving towards a singular utopian future. The problem is that utopian future is not based on the Bible or based on the Bible's definition of the view of total depravity of man. You cannot achieve a humanistic vision of the world apart from recognizing that man is fallen and requires the right system of order to keep him in check. And so what happens? We get disappointed. The working class chooses property and family over utopia. And so what ultimately happens is that modern identity politics starts to kind of maneuver to try to make something happen here. And so the disparate coalition with no shared positive vision, the new coalition is bound together only by vitriolic hatred of the present and inherited Western institutions. So the only thing left that the Marxists are unifying to is their hatred of the West. And that's what's trying to bring us down. Because they can't have their utopia. They recognize that they can only hate that which they can't have, or that which they don't want. So here's the thing. There's no neutral public square. Sorry to burst your bubble, but there's nothing neutral in the world. You either believe in alignment to biblical order and truth, or you are in a lie, fundamentally disconnected from the God and the truth and the reality of the nation, of the truth of the universe, and reflect how your nation is, whether it's going to be properly ordered or whether it's going to be in constant chaos or moving towards biblical order. So there is this idea that we have been toying with for a long time, and it's a kind of ideal to kind of unify our American understandings in the modern America, postmodern America, that we can have this neutral public square. Well, here's the thing. All these disparate tribes are going to create instant conflict. That's what it's designed to do. When you don't share basic worldviews, you create instant conflict. And of course, liberals are the intolerant ideologies. Free societies that refuse to police its boundaries or assert its own core values will rapidly be consumed by those who view tolerance as a weakness to be exploited. So the fallacy is secularism attempts to create a neutral public square, inviting all ideologies except Christianity, because it's deemed too authoritative. Well, no, it's the central operating system. So imagine if your computer tried to constantly push out the operating system. You're not going to get anything done. You're going to constantly see the blue screen of death. Well, guess what? That's what Congress constantly shows us now. That's what our political systems are demonstrating. That's what our cultural systems, that's what our education systems are showing us. The blue screen of death. Our operating system is built on biblical order. So this is a real challenge for people who possess libertarian ideologies, or ideally Marxist frameworks. Liberals, libertarians, same things, just from different ends of the spectrum. They believe that it's possible to have this utopian vision of the world and everyone's going to just cohere to it, and the left is going to use a little bit more force and the right is going to just, well, it's just going to happen. We'll just all pursue our own ends and everything will be happy, hunky-dory. No, you need right order through the biblical design for leadership. And our country is built on that foundation. So there's a lot more to talk about here, but I want to just mention this. We have the opportunity to understand the inheritance we were given. And if you don't understand the inheritance of the West, that it's not chronological snobbery, it's not some sort of moral superiority, it's the recognition of proper order. Things are going to operate as the physics allows. There's physics involved in right order of society. And our country is built on the proper understanding of those physics. And it's been dismantled because we are continuing to try to create our own definitions of those physical laws of the universe. And the fact that we are trying to do that is what's destroying us. There's only one system that will give you proper order that our country was built on, and that is the scriptures. Rightly contextualized to understand that every individual is a sinful person, and the more you give them power, the more sinful they become. However, the Bible requires that every individual, in particular men, are designed by God to lead their homes, to lead their families, which means extended families, to lead their communities, to lead their churches, and to lead their civic responsibilities, and as well as their workplaces. Every man is accountable individually for the governance of our nation because we have no ruling class to blame. We are America, every individual. We can run for office. We can put our foot down. We can do that. And that's only because we are recognizing God's important design, that from the beginning, God made the purpose of humanity is to manifest his logos order, and that men in particular are the first ones responsible for carrying out his order, for governing their family, and then spreading that out as the people of their connections grow. And that's what was required. And women are playing the appropriate role at being the growers of great men and the compass of great men. Women are amazing at making sure men stay on the right path and don't self-destruct and don't miss things that could hurt things. That's a great job of a woman. And on top of that, caring for children. And men are there to build and grow those children, not just to care for them. So that is the society that we must get back to understand how we are going to rebuild the West. Stay tuned, because there's going to be a lot more about this very thing.